Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. China and Europe under pressure as President Trump threatens US import tariffs from as early as next week.
I'm at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where UN Chief Antonio Guterres scolds big business over climate change.
Our other headlines: aid is now flowing into Gaza, but distributing it will be challenging because of the widespread devastation.
Mexico prepares to host tens of thousands of migrants as Donald Trump says he'll shut the door to the United States.
Which one will you save?
And a flying start for the animated blockbuster Dragon Keeper as it soars to success through the award season. President Trump says he could impose 10% tariffs on Chinese imports as soon as the 1st of February. He said it would be a response to his accusations that the drug fentanyl is being shipped from China to the United States through Mexico and Canada.
The tariffs would be significantly less than the 60% promised during the election campaign. It's raised fears of a resurgent trade war between the world's two biggest economies.
On this issue, we have repeatedly expressed China's position. We always believe that there are no winners in trade wars and tariff tit-for-tats. China has always firmly safeguarded its national interests.
Let's talk to our correspondent John Terrace at the New York Stock Exchange. John, what's the tariff reaction there?
Have you ever seen, Jamie and Robin, Donald Trump's hands? Have you? They're tiny, tiny little hands he's got. And so it's difficult for us to see whether he's carrying a stick or whether he's offering a carrot. We simply don't know. But both of these options are open over here at the moment and very much talked about. The thing you have to remember about Donald Trump is he talks a good talk. You know, he is first and foremost a salesman. That's what he is, as you know. And he's very aggressive when it comes to tariffs. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is the deal he did with China on various trade issues kind of fell apart in the face of COVID in his last term in office before he left and Joe Biden took over. And I think that plays on his mind. And then he's trying to row America back from various organizations where he thinks that America's just simply paid too much. That's why we're coming out of the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Change Accord. And so this all speaks to what's going on regarding tariffs. We don't know whether this is rhetoric that he's talking about now or whether it is real, or whether it is just a negotiating tactic, because as you know, he prides himself on his negotiating tactics. No one really is too sure, and I will tell you it's causing confusion here right now on the stock exchange with the investors and the traders surrounding me. Journalists are not sure, and politicians even are not sure, on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where they have to carry out all these policies that Trump wants to put into place. At least some of them they have to turn their attention to. Now, the latest news here overnight, we learned that President Trump is talking about adding 10% tariffs next week, as early as next week, to China goods and Canada and Mexico goods. And the reason he's citing is fentanyl, which he blames China for sending over, and it's coming in, according to him, through the northern border and the southern border. And he's also talking for the first time about tariffs on the European Union as well. Now, the only thing we know for sure is that despite what I just said about needing the help of Congress with much of this stuff, when it comes to imposing tariffs, he does have the legal powers as the President of the United States. It is within his purview to do so. But here's the thing. Everybody is looking at this now and thinking, well, you know, hang on a minute, because I think this is all happening a bit slower than anybody expected. If you remember on Monday, around the world, the markets were positive. And then when we got back on Tuesday, we were very positive because there was no mention in the early stages of this new administration of Trump tariffs on China. People were buoyed up by that. Now he's suggesting 10% as early as next week. We don't know whether that will be 10% on top of the 25% he previously talked about regarding Canada and Mexico and the 60% he previously talked about regarding China. It is all very much up in the air. And there is countries around the world and companies around the world are very worried about collateral damage. Now, there is no coincidence whatsoever that the big tech names were sitting few feet away from him at the inauguration on Monday. I think they're probably having an effect. What we think is happening is that there is a deadline within the administration to come up with ideas on what to do about tariffs, particularly regarding China, and the deadline for that appears to be April the 1st, so a couple of weeks away. If you hear talk about currency misalignment and trade imbalances ever, then that is China. That's what they're talking about. And there will at some point be an indication of what they're going to do regarding tariffs in China, but it's all a bit vague at the moment. And for that reason, we have another very, very strong rally going on Wall Street here, with the Dow presently up 0.1%, NASDAQ in the green, S&P 500 now flirting with its first all-time high of 2025 at 60.87 when I saw it just now, guys.
John, thank you for that. Our correspondent John Terrace at the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, President Trump has said that Europe is not immune from his tariff policies on imports. During a White House press conference, he accused the EU of not buying American cars or farm products.
We have a $350 billion deficit with the European Union. They treat us very, very badly, so they're going to be in for tariffs. It's the only way you're going to get back. It's the only way you're going to get fairness. You can't get fairness unless you do that.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz says Germany and its European allies will closely watch decisions made by the new US President Donald Trump. Scholz has been meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, where he said Trump's presidency would be a challenge. Let's talk to our correspondent Giles Gibson, who's in Paris. Giles, the meeting between these two bound to be dominated by President Trump so soon after his inauguration. What do we know about it?
Robin, good evening from a rainy Paris. What we were told ahead of this meeting was that it was time to celebrate the 62nd anniversary of the Elysee Treaty. That was a treaty that was signed in the early 1960s by France and West Germany at the time. We were also told that they were going to be discussing, the two leaders, European competitiveness, cutting red tape, the situation in Ukraine as well as the Middle East. But of course, those threats of tariffs from the new US president will have been hanging over this trip, and that's what we saw a lot of discussion about in some ways in the press conference just ahead of the meeting. We saw Emmanuel Macron saying that after the inauguration of a new administration in the US, there needs to be a united, strong and sovereign Europe. And also those words were echoed by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, saying that President Trump will be a challenge and that Europe must be strong and resilient. Those words before the two leaders headed in for a working lunch together at the Elysee Palace and then talks throughout the afternoon.
Both Macron and Scholz have had political difficulties at home recently. How difficult will it be for them to project a united front?
Well, there was certainly an attempt in terms of the body language at the start of the meeting to project exactly that, a united front. We saw the two men sort of putting their arms behind each other and posing for the cameras before they went in to the Elysee Palace. They also kind of, as I say, echoed each other's language in the press conference. But they do have their differences, these two men. Those are pretty public. They've clashed over things like the Mercosur trade deal with parts of Latin America, Chinese electric vehicles and tariffs, as well as joint borrowing for defence spending, which has been pushed by Macron and opposed by Scholz. And also, we have to state that these two leaders are trying to push back against Trump from a pretty weak position domestically. Of course, Olaf Scholz is heading into elections in just about a month's time at the end of February. His party, the SPD, really trailing behind their rivals in the polls. And also Emmanuel Macron, the French president. He's had 3 prime ministers in just over a year, and his latest prime minister, François Bayrou, just survived a no-confidence vote in the French parliament just last week. So these two leaders trying to present that united front, even though they've got some serious complications back home.
Giles, thank you very much. Our correspondent Giles Gibson in Paris. Well, Donald Trump's threat of tariffs is a hot topic of conversation at the World Economic Forum, too. Our correspondent Juliet Mann is in Davos. So, Juliet, what have people there been saying?
Well, you know what, Robin and Jamie, Trump's America First agenda really does raise some awkward questions for the Davos set and also for the European Union. As we heard there from John and also from Giles, he's threatened tariffs on EU goods. He says, well, he's accused Europe of not, well, saying America has been treated very, very badly. European Central Bank head Christine Lagarde said what we need to do here in Europe is be prepared. We need to anticipate what's happened and then respond. And if you think that sounds suitably vague for a central banker, well, the Commission is also choosing its words very carefully. And the EU Trade Commissioner, Valdis Dombrovskis, said here in Davos that the EU will react proportionately to any tariffs to protect and defend its economic interests. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, he's also been speaking here, using his platform in Davos to slam social media. He said it's eroding democracy by spreading disinformation. He didn't hold back, he really didn't, and he said that tech billionaires, especially those who are heading up social media companies, really need to be held accountable.
What truly limits democracy is the power of the elites. It is the power of those who think that because they are rich, they are above the law and can do anything. That is why, my friends, that is why the tech billionaires want to overthrow democracy. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth and the terrible threat we face. The technology that was intended to free us has become the tool of our own oppression.
I spoke to Andrej Plenković, he's the Prime Minister of Croatia, and he was a little bit more conciliatory. He said that Trump back in the White House presents an opportunity for the EU.
When it comes to the United States-EU relation, we need a lot of pragmatism, better understanding. We need to strengthen our economies, especially in the big member countries. Stagnation is not a very good economic situation, and therefore I think we should use the capabilities of increasing our trade, which is mutually beneficial, and we have proven in the past that there are ways to do it.
I also spoke to Hong Kong's Finance Secretary, Paul Chan, about what Trump in the White House will mean for trade.
Well, with President Trump, I think the basic premises, such as geopolitical tension, geopolitical economic fragmentation, will be there. But at the same time, as a super connector and super value adder, we can find a way to add value and to grow. Say, for example, on the trading front, nowadays a lot of mainland companies going global. They have their manufacturing bases in Southeast Asia to realign their industry base in response to this trade tension. So Hong Kong, in the process, can serve as a high value-added supply chain management center, trade finance center. So this is just one example.
And don't forget, we will be hearing from the man himself, President Donald Trump, at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos. He's appearing via video link tomorrow, Thursday. Now, I'll be back a little bit later on in the programme to talk about what business leaders have been saying about climate change and the green transition. So I'll see you a little bit later on.
Juliet, thank you very much. More from Juliet Mann in just a moment.
Marco Forgione is Director General of the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade. Marco, welcome back. Good to see you. So Mr. Trump considering imposing a 10% tariff on import of Chinese goods from the 1st of February. Is this the glimpse of what the next 4 years of US trade policy is going to look like, or, to misquote Trump's book, the start of negotiations?
Absolutely. I think what we can know with certainty is that Trump is going to use every tool in the toolbox, every weapon in his armory to negotiate and secure the best possible deal for America, whether that's through imposing direct tariffs or requiring those who want to trade with the US to adopt really strict rules of origin and amend their supply chains. So I think we're seeing a real shift now in the way in which America trades and the role that the administration feels America could play and should play in the global economy.
One imagines that government flunkies around the world are rushing out to buy Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. Presumably, both of America's neighbours, Canada and Mexico, will be troubled with the mention of import tax of 25%. If that stays, if 25% stays in those respective countries, how impactful might those be if enforced?
Well, there are a number of impacts that's going to have immediately on the supply and the trade between Canada and Mexico and the US. It will encourage production back into the US, but also where does that product find a new market, and the supply chains that are feeding those manufacturers in Canada and the US. So what America is doing isn't just going to impact directly Canada, Mexico or China, but will have a global impact because of the highly integrated supply chains, and the disruption that we're seeing now is, I think, a response to the realization that what happens now, what the incoming administration implements now, has much broader impact than just that direct point-to-point trade flow. So, I think that the reality is that it is often said that you don't need to take Trump literally, but you need to take him seriously, has never been more important, because you need to respond to actually what happens as much as the noise that is being created. And if you do read The Art of the Deal, you'll understand that making sure that the Trump administration, have the best platform, the strongest platform to do a deal means destabilizing those that you're trying to deal with, and that's exactly what's happening currently.
With that in mind then, what can the European Union expect, perhaps, in terms of tariffs?
Mexico and China, we're talking about.
I think Trump is already setting out the stall. The European Union is going to have to look at not just allowing more American automotive into the EU, allowing more agricultural produce, but also to shift its purchasing of energy to the US. I think those are the fundamentals that need to be looked at before any hope of a longer-term, more stable trading relationship.
Marco, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming back on the programme. Marco Forgione, Director General of the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade.
Britain's biggest budget airline, EasyJet, has halved its operating loss in its first quarter, fuelled by demand and easing fuel costs. EasyJet saw a year-on-year passenger growth of 7% during the period. Losses beat expectations, coming in at $49 million for the 3 months to December. The airline says it sees continuing demand for flights and holiday packages.
Netflix is raising prices for some of its subscribers after reporting nearly 19 million new customers in the last quarter of 2024. The cost of monthly standard and premium subscription plans are to increase in the United States, Canada, Portugal and Argentina. Netflix ended the last quarter of the year with a record 300 million subscribers, pushing the shares 13% up to an all-time high.
TikTok's owner, ByteDance, has released an update to its flagship AI model. The Chinese company claims the new Doubao 1.5 Pro outperforms OpenAI's ChatGPT in several categories. ByteDance has secured partnerships for the technology to be used in a number of leading Chinese car brands. It's installed on around 300 million smart devices.
The US banking giant Morgan Stanley has officially launched its futures company in China, headquarters in Beijing. The wholly owned firm provides brokerage services for Chinese onshore commodity futures. Morgan Stanley is the second major US bank to enter China's derivatives market.
Shares in the world's largest battery maker, CATL, dropped nearly 4% after the company warned its annual revenue fell for the first time last year. 2024 net profit growth grew at the slowest rate since 2019. The Chinese company is due to report full-year results in March.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, stay on the right side of history. The United Nations warns businesses and governments to commit to climate action.
In the 18th century, a small number of products escaped from China and lit a touch paper in the West of excitement.
It's amazingly impressive because they were such incredibly talented artists.
When you talk about silk, with a value of 3 or 4 garments, you could buy a palace.
art is traveling as a silent ambassador to spread the word about culture and civilization.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The head of the United Nations has accused business leaders of backtracking on climate action.
Antonio Guterres said they're selfish and on the wrong side of history. He also called on governments to stick to promises and publish green transition plans. Well, Guterres was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Our correspondent Juliet Mann is there. Juliet, a stark warning from the United Nations.
Yes, Jamie, and you know what? It really has become a bit of a hallmark of the World Economic Forum here in Davos. The UN Secretary-General scolding the business elite about inaction when it comes to climate. Antonio Guterres has been one of the highest profile advocates in the fight against climate change. But that effort has really been shaken up by Donald Trump saying that he's going to drill, baby, drill. Look, just days into his second presidency, he's pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords, which has raised big questions about the future of the global environmental diplomacy movement. In his speech here in Davos, as you were saying, he was really scolding the business community for backsliding on their climate commitments. And I'm not just talking about fossil fuel companies and that sector more generally. He was pointing the finger at advertising, at lobbyists, at PR. He said they're all aiding, abetting and greenwashing. He said that really what we mustn't do, the world mustn't do, is take this big step backwards.
Our fossil fuel addiction is a Frankenstein monster, sparing nothing and no one. All around us, we see clear signs that the monster has become master. We just endured the hottest year and the hottest decade in history. It means we need to fight even harder to get on track, especially when we are seeing today sea level rise, heat waves, floods, storms, droughts and wildfires, and that are just a preview of the horror movie to come.
Guterres also told the leaders of some of the major banks who pulled out of net zero commitments before Trump got into office that they were on the wrong side of history. Well, let's bring in Kei Eugene, who's a Chinese economist and also a professor at the London School of Economics. It's great to see you here in Davos. Lots to unpick here, but what's your take? The United States pulling out of those Paris Accords, what does it mean for climate diplomacy?
First of all, I think what Trump personifies is a gradual normalization of unacceptable behavior and abnormal behavior that the world has worked so carefully on building, collaborating around this central goal. And that abdication of this leadership role gives some countries like China more of an opportunity, again, the opposite reaction, to coalesce these forces to do the necessary good.
There's lots of talk about the cost of inaction being greater than the cost of action. So what does it all mean for the global economy?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of economic growth drivers coming from the new energy type, renewables, green tech, etc., that many countries should be embracing rather than going backward to the traditional energy-consuming industries. And this means that, the implication is, of course, tariffs and higher prices and, of course, then higher interest rate. And it's all a vicious circle.
JP Morgan's boss, Jamie Dimon, has said that the United States markets are really inflated. He's got a much more cautious approach. What's your outlook with Trump back in office?
Well, first of all, the interest rates being as high and as long as it has been, without causing a recession in the U.S., while causing recessions and financial problems in other countries, that's not a sustainable pattern. And the dollar, many believe, is overvalued, and there is some belief that it will return to a more depreciated level. But of course, the tariff implications on the world are tremendous, not least for the U.S., but for all countries involved.
So let's look ahead. Let's look ahead to 2025. What do you think the mega trends are going to be?
Well, I have to say, across WEF, chaos is still a marker of what's happening. If you look around the world, unpredictability gradually becoming more predictable, and of course, multipolarity, fragmentation, but diversification. So many countries doing everything to diversify trading partners, investment partners, currencies, payment channels. That is the major theme here.
Trade war, yes or no?
No one interested except for Trump himself.
Kei Eugene, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Kei Eugene, Chinese economist and professor at the London School of Economics. Now, energy production is at the heart of the climate change challenge and the push to go green and to go cleaner. It's also key to finding those solutions to reduce global emissions. Take a look at this.
Burning fossil fuels such as coal, oil and gas to generate electricity is responsible for 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions and nearly 90% of all carbon dioxide emissions. The International Renewable Energy Agency says 90% of the world's electricity can and should come from renewable energy by 2050. The global agency says transitioning from dirty to green energy should not only help tackle climate change, but also boost jobs. Although 5 million jobs in fossil fuel production could be lost by 2030, it's estimated 14 million new ones could be created in developing clean energy. Coal still dominates China's energy generation mix, but in May last year, its share fell from 60 to 53%, the lowest share on record. Renewables made up 38%, with the solar part of that jumping from 7 to 12%. Renewable power generation has grown substantially in China over the last 2 decades. In 2022, it installed more solar capacity than the US and EU combined.
I've been speaking to energy executives here in Davos about the energy transition, and one of those was Marco Alvaro. He's the CEO of green hydrogen company TESH2, and he said that unlike revolutions that have taken place in other sectors, like in cars, think of Tesla, think of BYD, the energy revolution is in the slow lane.
The energy industry is still very analogic, still very old school. Pipes and turbines, and so to deliver the new types of energies that have to do with transforming electricity into molecules, like for hydrogen, or transforming batteries into somewhere that we can store energy for long periods of time. I think that requires a new type of company, an agile company, a smart company that can really partner, that is born with the DNA of partnerships.
The big picture on global energy, on the climate transition, is being hotly debated here by leaders from all around the world. But small things are happening on a grassroots level around the world too. Giles Gibson reports from Italy, where renewable energy communities are gaining traction.
This is probably what most people picture when they think of renewable energy. Row upon row of solar panels or wind turbines in a vast field. But in the Italian capital, renewable energy projects are on a different scale, squeezed in wherever there's space. These solar panels sit on the roof of the Istituto Leonardo Vaccari, which offers rehab and other services to people with disabilities. The panels were installed with support from a local charity and the private company Edison Energy.
This plant at full capacity, so with the summer sun, can produce 86 kilowatt hours, so it is a very large plant, a system that covers the entire roof of the institute.
Surplus power is sold back to the grid, with the proceeds used to support local families struggling to pay their energy bills. This general model is known in Italian as a comunità energetica rinnovabile, or renewable energy community, which researchers see as a game changer.
It is a real innovation. For the first time, citizens, associations, small businesses can get together and self-produce by decentralising electricity.
The European Union first passed legislation to allow for the creation of energy communities back in 2019. The Italian government currently provides subsidies of up to 40% of the cost of projects, but it's been criticised for a slow uptake so far. Environment Minister Gilberto Pichetto Fratin says he's working on making it easier to access subsidies. Across the EU as a whole, renewables now make up about a quarter of the energy mix. But thousands of energy communities would need to be set up to make a significant dent in the bloc's long-term targets.
Even so, speaking to people involved in community energy projects here in Rome, there is a sense of untapped potential. That empty roofs on top of schools and hospitals and universities all over the city could be turned into long-term sources of clean energy. Giles Gibson for CGTN, Rome.
The sessions continue here in Davos with a big focus on AI and innovation. They're looking at startups and what the market's like, also the healthcare sector. But I have to tell you, Jamie and Robin, that the big draw tomorrow is going to be President Trump. He's appearing via video link in exactly 24 hours. That's going to be what everyone's anticipating. That's what everyone's going to be reacting to.
Juliet, thank you very much. Our correspondent Juliet Mann in Davos. Now known for its majestic glaciers and landscapes, Greenland is also home to something the world is eager to get its hands on: rare earth minerals.
The spotlight is back on this autonomous Danish territory after President Trump suggested that the United States needed it for national security purposes. Our correspondent Evangelos Ipsas reports.
In Greenland, the environment is a way of life. But with the world focusing on its rich natural resources, many here are thinking about how to protect what makes this place so special while moving forward. It's something Greenlandic social media influencer Kupanuk Olsen feels strongly about.
We have always been one with the nature. We will always be one with the nature. Please keep protecting our nature. And let's just pollute as little as possible together.
It's a tough choice. Greenland's mineral wealth could provide much-needed income and jobs, but the cost might be irreversible. For Olsen, though, the answer lies in striking a balance.
Then we need more income. And as long as it's on behalf of us Inuit, us putting out the regulations, as long as it's on our behalf, I strongly believe we'll be okay. Because we do need more collaboration with other countries than just Denmark. And because our regulation is so strict, I strongly believe that we can still maintain our unpolluted country.
Greenland's natural resources gained global attention after President Trump announced he wants to buy the island. While these resources offer economic potential, many Greenlanders feel large-scale mining could scar their landscape. For some, protecting the environment is non-negotiable.
For us, we live on our nature here in Greenland. The nature is one of the most important things for the Greenlandic people. We live just beside it and we use it every day to feed ourselves, to feed our children, to make money, to make growth, to pay our bills. So if you want to collaborate with Greenland, it has to be in respect of we are protecting our environment really, really, really strong.
For many, it's more than resources. It's about survival, with a culture and life that is deeply tied to the land and sea. Greenlanders say that the biggest challenge now is balancing economic growth while preserving the environment and their heritage. But many worry that all this could come at a cost they can't afford to pay. Evangelos Ipsas for CGTN, Nuuk, Greenland.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. Aid is now flowing into Gaza, but distribution remains a challenge due to the widespread devastation.
Peking opera, or Jinju, is a classic form of Chinese performance art, combining the music of Chinese instruments, costume, face painting, literature and history. It arose in Beijing over 200 years ago during the Mid-Qing dynasty. There are four main characters: the Sheng, who are gentlemen, Dan, who are women, Jing, who are men of strong character, and Chou, who are clowns. Each character has a different age, gender, and social status. Performers use four main skills, namely song, speech, dance acting, and combat. And the highest aim of performers is to put beauty into every motion. Today, Peking opera is regarded as a quintessential form of Chinese culture.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. China and Europe under pressure as President Trump threatens US import tariffs from as early as next week.
And the United Nations Secretary General tells business leaders to stay on the right side of history by committing to climate action.
Rescuers in Gaza say they've recovered at least 120 bodies over the last 2 days as Palestinians return to destroyed homes.
With the ceasefire holding into its fourth day, the United Nations says nearly 2,500 aid trucks have now entered the territory. UN officials say 80% of Gaza's population is reliant on food aid. Our correspondent Rami Al-Magari is in Khan Yunis in Gaza.
The challenge is the fact that let us start with one important fact that the United Nations has been able to bring into the territory, to bring some truckloads that are new, because of the truckloads are depleted here in the territory for the past 15 months, no repair, no spare part, so more truckloads are needed. Also, let us refer here to the heavy equipment brought from the Egyptian side to pave the road around the Rafah crossing terminal for the truckloads to enter smoothly in the territory. One of the main challenges that the Gaza Strip is facing now, the main challenging actually and the key one, is the repair of the infrastructure, and especially in the southern Gaza Strip town or city of Rafah, where the municipality has already started some pavement and some repair of the roads, some repair of the water wells for the people. A few water wells can be repaired basically for the water to run into the population, the homes that have been left intact because of the intensive Israeli operations for more than 8 months now in Rafah city. The other challenges facing the Gaza Strip is the fact that many of those people who have been, many corpses have been taken out from the rubble, dozens of corpses have been taken out from the rubble. People are grieving their beloved ones. And also, let me just mention that a few people or a few households have been able to return to their residential places in the south of the Gaza Strip. Actually, this is the main challenges that the Palestinians here are facing under the widespread destruction of the territory because of the 15-month-long Israeli war on the Gaza Strip. They are looking forward to getting back. Some hundreds of thousands of people looking forward to going back to their residential homes in the northern Gaza Strip and Gaza City, starting from Saturday, when Hamas is supposed actually to release 4 women hostages from the Israeli women's hostages on Saturday, and the people will begin returning back to their battered homes, battered neighborhoods actually in Gaza City and northern Gaza Strip.
The Red Cross has been helping transfer Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners as part of the ceasefire agreement. CGTN has been talking to the president of the organization.
It is clear to everyone that this remains a very fragile agreement, but it is of utmost importance that it holds, that we can continue facilitating these operations until all families have been reunited with their loved ones or have been able to bury them with dignity. So we continue working with both sides. We are already preparing, if there are more release operations, to be able to support them.
Israeli forces have confirmed that they killed 10 Palestinians in Jenin as they continue operations in the occupied West Bank.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the country is trying to eradicate terrorism. Our correspondent Jonathan Regeb reports now from Tel Aviv.
So we just heard comments from Defense Minister Israel Katz saying that the same offensive notion that the army applied in Gaza and in Lebanon will now be applied in the West Bank. And an interesting comment from Israel Katz, he says that as opposed to what happened in Gaza, the army is not intending to operate in an area and then leave that area and allow militant cells to grow again, but to be present at all times. Of course, the Israeli army is present in the West Bank, not so much in Area A, which is an area which is has both civilian and security control on paper given to the Palestinian Authority. But according to Defense Minister Israel Katz, the army wants to be present at all times to make sure that even after an operation ends and after the Israeli army, at least the plan is to eradicate the militant cells, then those cells do not grow back again. Another comment from Israel Katz, he said that the operation, which now began in Jenin, may spill over to other areas of the West Bank. Jenin, of course, being pretty much the militant capital of the West Bank, with cells belonging mostly to Islamic Jihad, but also to Hamas, very active in the area. The Israeli operation, we have to say, began just as a previous operation, one led by the Palestinian Authority in the same area, ended. For about 6 weeks, the Palestinian Authority was operating in the area of Jenin, but the results probably were not satisfying as far as Israel is concerned, and that is why the decision was to engage in a major operation in the area of Jenin. As you have mentioned, for the moment, Palestinian sources speak of 10 people killed, many more injured. Palestinian sources also say that many of those killed were not involved in any militant activity. Israel, of course, contradicts that, saying that practically all of those targeted are militants, and at least judging by the words of the defense minister, this operation will continue for days and days to come.
9 people have been arrested in Turkey following the fire at a ski resort hotel that killed 76 people. The owner is among those detained. Dozens were injured at the hotel in the Bolu Mountains. Survivors claim fire alarms failed to go off, with some guests forced to jump from the windows. Turkey's president says the investigation will leave no stone unturned.
An administrative and criminal investigation has been initiated regarding the cause of the fire. In this context, 6 public prosecutors and a board of experts have been assigned. All necessary steps will be taken and are being taken to shed light on all aspects of the incident and to hold those responsible accountable.
Mexico is preparing for the fallout from Donald Trump's new border policies. There are fears of a possible humanitarian crisis if the US president carries out his threat to deport millions, while others continue to arrive at the border. Thousands are stranded there already after the United States switched off an app for booking appointments. Well, our correspondent Alistair Babastock is in Mexico, near to the US border. So, Alistair, what's the situation like now?
Well, you're absolutely right. And the indefinite suspension of the US asylum program has stranded thousands, indeed an estimated 270,000 asylum seekers who are waiting, as you can see, on this side of the US-Mexico border in Mexico. And exactly, it's causing a great deal of anxiety here over exactly what they're going to do now, not least because migrants, international migrants moving through Mexico are given travel permits to transit the country once they had at least a US border asylum appointment. But with all those appointments now cancelled indefinitely, all those international migrants, people from Nicaragua, from Venezuela, from Peru, all now find themselves without any sort of legal migratory status in Mexico and therefore subject to deportation from Mexico at any time. So exactly what they're going to do is very, very difficult. One of the prerequisites, of course, for asylum is to be fleeing persecution in your home country. So very few migrants willing to return to the places where they are fleeing from. Remaining in Mexico, also without that legal status, very, very difficult. So a lot of migrants I've been speaking to are saying, well, now with the border closed to them, with no legal pathways open to them to get into the United States, many are now looking to turn to human smugglers, organized crime, the famous Mexican coyotes who will take them undocumented past this border and into the United States. So a very difficult situation for hundreds of thousands of people now at the US-Mexico border.
So if President Trump carries out what he's promised to do, what's Mexico doing to get ready for this potential influx of people?
Well, these mass deportations are a real concern. Tijuana, specifically at the western end of the US-Mexico border. Here behind me, you can see where this emblematic border wall actually runs into the Pacific Ocean. Tijuana receives around 40% of the total deportations along the length of this 3,000-kilometer border. Well, Tijuana currently receives about 100 deportees a day. The local authorities have said they are apt to receive around 400 maximum a day. But if Trump's mass deportations go into full flow, it's estimated that 1,000 deportees will be arriving in Tijuana on a daily basis onto this side of the border. That will absolutely overwhelm this city. It will overwhelm shelters, it will overwhelm services, and not forgetting, of course, that deportees, having spent 20, 25, 30 years in the United States, are loath to return to their places of origin. They want to stay around the border region, close to their lives and their families still inside the United States. So it will overwhelm border cities here along the Mexican side of the border. Mexico's president has said specifically that her government will be there to help these deportees, to give financial stimulus to them, to help these deportees resettle back into Mexico. But that's about as far as her comments have gone on the subject. And of course, Mexico has said it's open to receiving deportees who are not necessarily Mexicans. Well, that means if 50% of those deportees, 1,000 deportees arriving in Tijuana on a daily basis, have to be then deported back to their home countries, that will represent an enormous amount of logistics and economic outlay for Mexico's authorities, money which they don't necessarily have. So a very difficult situation here at the border. Back to you, Robin.
Alistair Babastock in Tijuana, thank you very much. One of the controversial executive orders that President Trump has signed includes his plan to end US birthright to citizenship. David Schultz is Professor of Political Science and Legal Studies at Hamline University in Minnesota.
He cannot do that. And the reason why he can't do that is that birthright citizenship is placed in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and the Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld the birthright citizenship as an essential component of the U.S. Constitution. And the reason why this is important is even though executive orders can do lots of things, executive orders cannot violate the law and they cannot violate the U.S. Constitution. So for Donald Trump, issuing this executive order essentially is going to lead to, as we've already seen, significant legal challenges across the United States. And under current law, under current Supreme Court doctrine and precedent, he would lose in terms of trying to end it. Now, that's not to say that it's not possible for the court to change their mind, but highly improbable that that would happen.
And this particular thing is all part of a wider immigration crackdown that President Trump's promised. What other legal challenges might he run into?
Well, he's going to find other legal challenges also in terms of some of his border policies. For example, he wants to be able to use U.S. troops to be able to do policing along our border, and that possibly violates a law that goes back to 1878 that prevents the use of military for policing purposes. Additionally, if he's going to halt the asylum or if he's going to try to expedite deportations, there's going to be a lot of court challenges and individual claims for hearings that are going to be held. So a lot of what he's going to do is going to significantly get bogged down in the courts, facing a lot of legal challenges. Now, yes, Congress could pass some laws to try to make things easier, but still there are a lot of constitutional and legal obstacles behind what he wants to be able to do.
And what about the US withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement? Is that going to face hurdles as well?
It will not, because the United States never entered that as a formal treaty. To create a formal treaty domestically in the United States, which is binding, you would need to have the Senate approve it. What the Paris Accords are in the United States is considered to be an executive agreement, and executive agreements can be entered into or broken almost at presidential will. Now, at the international level, the Paris Accords occupy a different status in international law. But here, as we saw what he did several years ago when he was president, he pulled out. He's doing it again here. It's not to say there might not still be legal challenges, but it'll be easier for him to do that than it will be to do some of the other things that he's proposing. Generally, presidents have more leeway to act in what we call international affairs or international events than they do in domestic issues.
So we've seen more than 100 executive orders signed already in just the opening hours of this presidency. How much of this is just making a statement, and how much of this will actually end up being done?
A lot of what he's issuing in terms of executive orders really read more like press accounts or press releases at this point. I mean, they're things that are appealing to his base, but lots of them don't really mean anything in terms of binding in law. Lots of them are just, I don't want to call them wish lists, but a lot of it really does not carry the force of law. Some of it's going to require Congress to act. Some of it is going to require perhaps other changes in policy or procedures. But I would say a certainly large percentage of what he's doing at this point is more playing to his political base and making statements as opposed to really making any significant, let us say, legal or policy change.
Prince Harry has been awarded substantial damages and given a full apology by Rupert Murdoch's media group for serious intrusions into his private life. This brings to an end a long-running legal battle between King Charles' second son and News Group newspapers. The publisher admitted private investigators working for the Sun newspaper had acted unlawfully. It also apologized for historic phone hacking, surveillance and misuse of private information carried out by the tabloid The News of the World.
Now, the first feature-length animated movie, co-produced by China and Spain, is enjoying a fruitful awards season. Dragon Keeper is an adaptation of Carol Wilkinson's fantasy novel, telling the story of a girl who finds the last remaining dragon egg. Our correspondent Ken Brown has been talking to the film's executive producer in Madrid.
What is that? Dragon Keeper. The story of enslaved orphan girl Ping, who holds the destiny of the last of the dragons in her hands. It's already won the Golden Rooster for Best Animation in China and has been nominated for 3 of Spain's national film awards, the Goyas. Meanwhile, executive producer Larry Levine picked up another prize in the Spanish capital.
Welcome to Awards Night in Madrid, held by Cátedra China, a Spanish organisation trying to bring Spain and China a little bit closer. Dragon Keeper and its executive producer Larry Levine are worthy winners tonight, having created the first ever feature-length animated movie co-production between China and Spain.
Ask not what lies. Adapted from the novel by Carol Wilkinson, it stars Bill Nighy as the dragon Long Danzi, Bill Bailey as Wang Chao, and Mayalini Griffiths as Ping. The film had two directors, Salvador Simó from Spain and China's Li Jianping.
Two directors, two screenwriters, two VFX supervisors. Every member of the team of the supervisions of the chief of departments were Chinese and Spanish. You need to find the values that we share. And that was the challenge, and that is a success. Because we made the film is successful, it won the biggest prize in China, it's been released in more than 30 countries up to now, so it's a success.
China's ambassador to Spain, Yao Jing, was also present at the awards ceremony, hinting that Dragon Keeper could be the first of many co-productions.
Right now, we are discussing with the Spanish government for a new movie cooperation agreement to be finalized within this year. This demonstrates that we are determined to move forward, to explore more areas, and to also have a closer collaboration in the cultural sector.
The awards just keep coming for Dragon Keeper, and it may just be the beginning of a blockbuster relationship that's off to a flying start. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
Which one will you save?
People across China have started marking what's known as the Little New Year. The day honours the kitchen god when families clean their houses ahead of the Lunar New Year celebrations. The deity is believed to report a household's affairs to the Emperor of the Gods in heaven. Families offer special sweets to the kitchen god, hoping for blessings.
The headlines again. China and Europe under pressure as President Trump threatens US import tariffs from as early as next week.
For other headlines, the United Nations Secretary General tells business leaders to stay on the right side of history by committing to climate action.
And aid agencies warn of difficulties in getting food and other supplies across Gaza due to widespread devastation there.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN is Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.